Same thing as what we did 2 times ago. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to keep it trimmed down like to the length that we had it too? Or do you like where it's at right now?
No, I want to trim it down again.
So I didn't text you last night.
That's all good.
It's kind of just processing a lot.
Yeah.
Well, remember I was talking to you about how like you and Ox and other people in my life have been like physical representations, and I can like think like, oh, like what did they do in the situation, whatever. That happened again last night. I know that I have done things wrong. At the same time, like I know that a lot of the decisions that I have made has been like literally me going to God and going like, yo, what do you want me to do? And then I'm turning around and I'm doing it. You know what I'm saying? Last night, or just in conversations in general, people will really like test that and be trying to like sow seeds of like insecurity or like double-mindedness. I'm like, oh man, was that right? Like did it? And like actually I saw that like that actually happened one time with Oxford. Somebody had like, he had a conversation with somebody about something that they were like not doing correctly, and was like teaching them like, hey, this is what you need to do in these situations, yada yada yada. He turned around and was in the same situation and did everything that he needed to do correctly. And the person after, when we left from that spot, was like, I thought that and like tried to like make it seem like whatever. He like shut that down so fast, you know what I'm saying? And like, well, and maybe in some people's eyes like went off on the person, you know what I'm saying? But like really just shut the whole thing down. And I was like, dang, what the heck? So later we talked about that, obviously. And he was like, yeah, I'm not gonna let that person like make me think that my conduct isn't on point. You know what I'm saying? Just because they don't understand how to act in these moments, or because they felt like some type of way about the fact that they didn't do it correctly, and now they're trying to like make me feel insecure, like I'm not, whatever. So that was what was happening during that conversation. And I just thought about that, and I was like, yeah, nah, I'm not. I am confident in the decisions that I have made in that area. I'm confident that I'm literally like asking God, like, what do you want me to do here? And I'm confident that I have been doing that.
Yeah.
And like, just because you don't like how that feels, or you don't like how that looks, or that isn't like making you feel comfortable, I literally do not care. Like, that is not my problem or my responsibility for you to feel comfortable. And it was just interesting. So then after that, I just was like kind of thinking through that and like, man, like there's such a different like peace and like security when like the decisions that we make, when we're confident that they're like, that is the will of the Lord being played out. You know what I'm saying? Because then like people will try to come at you and like manipulate into thinking like, oh, like you're doing da because it makes me feel like whatever, or I don't like you because of it. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, yo, like that's cool. You know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of the decisions that I've made in life, even a lot of them after having already given my life to Christ, I second guessed because people didn't like me because of it. And I'm like, man, how many times do I have to read Jesus saying like, you're not going to like, people aren't going to like you because of the decisions that you make. You know what I'm saying? Now, obviously, I haven't shed any blood for the decisions that I've made, so it's not to that extreme. But was just like thinking about that a lot last night, and just like feel like ever since maybe 2 months ago, like God has been freeing me and continuing to free me from like trying to feel like I need to like everybody and trying to get everyone to like me. You know what I'm saying? But that's just like not the Lord's will. But instead, He's actually calling me to something much higher, and that's to love everyone, regardless of the fact that I don't like them or that they don't like me. And that's freed me to be able to love people in the capacity that they actually need. That I'm giving them the things that they need, and not just enabling them in their decisions because I want them to like me or I want to like them. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about like security in the decision making. You know what I'm saying? And how like to go about that so that like when people come against you, or just when like the enemy comes against you and like tries to like sow seeds of like, oh, you're like whatever, like how to combat that and how to like know that you're like on solid ground.
Yeah. For a lot of my life, I've been on that other extreme of Like, I'm going to do what causes people to like me, or what's going to favor them, or what is going to, or not even favor them, but what they're going to think is favoring them. I'm just going to do that. And I've been on that extreme for a lot of my life. I think the other extreme that I also can go to is spending time in prayer, seeing what it is that God's wanting me to do, and like being almost overly secure in it to the point where I don't hear what God's trying to tell me through somebody else. So like the balance that I've been trying to strike is like, this is the conclusion that I came to in my prayer closet. I'm going to be specific with this. If another believer approaches me and says, hey, I kind of thought maybe you were supposed to handle it this way instead. Like, that I'm going to go and still realize that I may not have grasped the whole thing. But my main thing is I'm just going to measure it up against the Bible. Like, whatever advice I get, even from another believer, like, I'm going to measure it against the Bible and also what I feel like God maybe has been telling me personally. And that's how I think I've tried to get into a balance. Because there have been times I've swung to the other end. When I was younger, we had a lot of friends and stuff who just would not have liked how I dressed. They wouldn't have liked the clothes that I wore, and they probably wouldn't have liked the fact that I had my ears pierced. Like, we just had some friends that would not have been a fan of that. And still may not be a fan of that. That sometimes drove me to an extreme of, like, almost spiting them.
For sure.
And, like, I almost want to make sure I'm wearing this when I'm around you. To show you that I really don't care. That you don't like that I'm doing this thing. And I took it to an extreme. Like, where at first, I maybe would have been like, let me make sure I don't have my earrings in when I'm around this person so they don't feel offended. That's one. Then I swung the other way of like, I'm going to make sure you know I'm secure in this and I don't care what you think. So I'm trying to strike that balance now of like what Paul said of, if you're around someone who's saying they don't eat meat and you're secure in the fact that you're eating it, you don't have to, one, go around them and, oh no, meat? Yeah, I don't eat that. To try and make them like you. And you also don't have to go eat it in their face and like, haha, look, I know you don't like this, but guess what? I'm going to do it anyway. Like, there's this balance.
What was it that he said?
He said, like, don't lead someone astray who Jesus died for, because the gospel is not eating or drinking, but fellowship in spirit or something like that. But the other thing that he also says in that I think people hear that part and go, oh, okay, so I'm just not supposed to care about anything. But what he also said in there is that if you have a conviction about something like that and you don't do it, it's sin. So he's not saying just do whatever. But he is saying it's not going to be the same for every person. So I may give you a conviction that I'm not giving to anybody else. So when that happens and other people think it's wrong because it's not the conviction I gave them, you better stand on it, because it's actually going to be sin if you don't follow through with what I was saying to do. I think that's probably more along the lines of what you're referring to.
So I think, we have, some examples of what that, of how to discern what the Lord's will is. I mean, if we seek out who He is, we're gonna know His character. So that means when we're in situations, we're gonna be able to discern, like, okay, God, I know You enough. Even if your literal spirit isn't like speaking into me or like whatever, like I know your character, and I'm gonna know what You want to do in these moments. But also, if we're actively submitting our relationships and friendships and jobs and whatever to people, like the prayer is that in the midst of that, God's gonna be like giving us the plan on what He wants to do with it. For example, like I submitted cutting hair to God. Through that, and during prayer and fellowship with other people, like God has been showing me, okay, this is what I want to do with it. So then when I'm in situations, I know what to do because I've kind of got the playbook. I'm not saying I haven't figured it out, but I have the playbook, right? So the prayer is that's happening in our relationships too. And I think that security is really important, because not only do we know where to go, but we know who it's coming from. So it's like we're able to discern the spirit behind the attack that comes against it. You know what I'm saying? And so I think a lot of times in our human relationships, and now this is this is speaking from the standpoint of walking in the Spirit, making decisions based out of the Spirit, and someone comes against that, but it's not of the Spirit. You know what I'm saying? We'll be able to discern that, I believe, because we'll know, we'll recognize, or maybe I should say, we don't recognize what spirit is coming from. Because it's like, oh, I don't feel like that's coming from the same heart space that I'm coming from. You know what I'm saying? And I think the biggest thing, and maybe this has just been my experience, I think in terms of human relationships, the spirit that a lot of times that stuff is coming from when people are coming against the decisions that you're making, and maybe I'm just saying this because this conversation's fresh, but I think a lot of times it comes from like this place of like hurt and like past experiences. So then they're seeing what you're doing through the lens of what they've gone through, and like this spirit of like pain is coming at you, like, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, whoa, like you can't even see what's happening because you're looking at this through the lens of all your other unhealed experiences. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's a big difference for the believer when God starts to heal us and work in us and free us from the things that we've gone through, is that we're able to like discern when those things are being done incorrectly, but we're able to point it out from a healed standpoint, and not like, this hurt me when somebody did whatever, and I'm gonna like correct you out of that hurt. You know what I'm saying?
I heard someone say this the other day, and I was like, oh, I gotta like chew on that for a second, and like I need to like flesh it out a little bit more. But I heard somebody say this. They're like, if you read the Gospels, people were like amazed by the way that Jesus lived and wanted to follow him off of the way that he lived, but they wanted to kill him off of what he said.
Whoosh.
He was like, isn't that interesting? And he was like, but it's interesting because he wasn't saying one thing and living another way. So that wasn't the key. So then what was it? And it's that when it's said, it can have a different harshness and will hit some of those triggers like you were saying. But when it's actually lived out, it's like, whoa, that's amazing. That actually is the way that it's supposed to be. And so I think sometimes the way that we're living is going to upset people. But it really should be that people are looking at us and going, wow, the way that person treats people, that is amazing. Like I think that's the way that we're supposed to live. And the thing that should be hard for people is when they're just like maybe hearing us talking about it.
Yeah, that's really good.
So, yeah.
No, that's really good. Yeah, everyone wants to be around like a joyful guy and like a whatever, and like, but then when that joyful guy starts holding you to the same standard, it's like, oh, nah, you gotta get out of here. You know, I ain't trying to hear that. You know what I'm saying?
When you're around me, you may not even notice that I'm not partaking in certain conversations. It's just like, man, I just don't feel like he ever really has anything that negative to say about anybody. And it's pleasant to be around.
Yep.
But then if you bring up a conversation, I go, oh, yeah, we're going to stop that right there. Like, that's not a fruitful conversation to have. That's different.
Facts.
Like, that's
a knife.
Yeah. Then, wait a second, I don't like that now. I liked it when I was just around you and you were doing it to me. Yeah, and like you were saying, now that you're trying to hold me to the same standard, I don't like this anymore.
I ain't trying to hear that. Yeah, that's good. Okay, for example, if let's say that situation happened, like what you just said, and you're like, yeah, we're not gonna do that, and that person kind of like tweaks out on you. You know what I'm saying? Since we're living and continuing to be transformed by this, like living out of like this new man that God's given us, right? That we've been able to put on, this new person that's like experience healing and like things that whatever, like we're gonna be able to see the hurt that these people are coming from, and it'll be an opportunity for us to speak into it, because we won't just be seeing like, oh, this person's trying to, you're not gonna come over here and try to like get me to live differently because and it's like, whoa, hold on, like, yeah, that's right, but like, since this doesn't have to do with us anymore, like I don't have to prove my point of why I'm living this way, because I know who created me and I know who created this person. So instead of trying to like have some debate on like, this is right and you're wrong and you're whatever. I can speak into the brokenness of this person's perspective. You know what I'm saying? Instead of taking such offense at the fact that like they're trying to disagree with me. And I'm not like trying to like die on this hill of like I'm right. I'm gonna be so real with you, bro. Like I know I'm right when it comes to Jesus. I'm not saying I have everything figured out about that. I know I'm right. And I'm not dying on that hill. I'm not getting on that. I'm not even starting that battle with somebody because it's pointless. And I know that there's certain things of conduct that I know I need to do regardless of what people think. But it's like, instead of having to like hold this position of like, no, I'm right, please. Like I can speak into the hurt of like where it's coming from. And like that even happened in one of the conversations. And it's not always as like soft and cuddly as I think we think it is. You know what I'm saying? Especially I think when dealing with like repeated offenses. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like when God first started pointing out some stuff in me, it felt a lot more like, hey, yeah, that one's a no. The more I kept falling into it, God was like, yeah, I'm not gonna keep just going like, hey buddy, because now you know. And now I kind of have to like hit you a little bit to like break you off, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that kind of happened too, of like I spoke into like hey, you have some like hurt here in this part of your life. I'm not going to live out of that same type of hurt and put myself in the situations that you've allowed yourself to be in because you weren't able to set up boundaries, or you weren't able to not do this, or you know what I'm saying? But sometimes that conversation can look different. But I feel like I was able to see past the fact that like this person was just disagreeing with what I was doing, and I was able to see like, oh wow, this conversation is coming out of a lack of a relationship with God, and you're spazzing out on me because of it. And I'm able to like not just be so worked up about you disagreeing with me. You know what I'm saying? I don't know, because I'm a debater. And if someone disagrees with me, I'm like, oh, bet. I'm about to tear you up. But instead I was like, oh wow, like you have this need that I needed too, and I've like found it. And I'm not gonna be so worked up that you don't agree with what I'm doing. But instead I'm gonna go like, hey, I see where this hurt. I see where this conversation is really coming from out of you. And like, I'm just gonna address that and be like, hey, like I know that you're hurting in this area of your life. Like, but like this way you're going about it is like not gonna fix it.
Yeah, and I think the hardest part to figure out, at least for me, is like how much am I called to step into those scenarios and like do what I know is best for someone else, even if they don't like it, and how much do I kind of give them over to the decisions that they're making. Like that's a really hard one. I think that obviously I'm not a parent, but a lot of the parents and stuff that I know, like that's a huge struggle. Just figuring out like when do I say they have a curfew, and then when do I say like, yeah, it's up to you now, you got to figure out when you want to go. Like those are so gray, and the Bible doesn't really give exact like times of when to do something and when not to. So I think that's always the hardest part for me, because I know that, and maybe it's just because I don't like confrontation, but I just feel like I so quickly go to like, you know what, we're on two different pages on this, like you go do whatever you feel like you need to do. And there aren't many times that I would do like the Bible says, of like snatching someone from the fire, of like, no, like I'm seeing this is wrong, like I'm pulling you over here, and you're like kicking and screaming, but I'm moving you out of harm's way. And there was someone who was talking about that, like a lot of times what like cops and stuff would have to do, they have to make tough decisions, dude. Of like, or even a firefighter, like there's a house fire and someone's belongings that really mean something to them, or their pet, or their like whatever it would be, is inside and they're trying to run inside. Like they've got to like hold you back. You're screaming going, no, I've got to get in there, but like the firefighter has to be able to like get outside of their emotions at that point, or even the fact that maybe this person is harming them for the fact that they're holding them back, and go like, yep, and I'm going to have to do what's best for you right now, and what's best for you is to not go in there. I think I typically, in that analogy, would be the one to like, okay, fine, you want to go in there? Okay, have fun. And not like be strong enough to like, nope, I'm going to hold you back and not let that happen.
I'm sure a lot of this is like how in Proverbs it's like, if you respond to a fool, it makes you a fool. And then the next verse says like, if you don't respond to a fool, then like whatever. And it's like, wait, what? It's kind of one of those things of like, there's a time for either one of those. I'm sure a lot of it is that when it comes to snatching people from the fire, but there's got to be some signs too of like when to do that and when not to. Like the firefighters, they don't know where the fires are at. You know what I'm saying? But people are calling them and going like, hey, like my house is on fire, come help me. You know what I'm saying? Like they're not like negating the fact that there's a fire. They also aren't putting it out. Maybe they don't have the ability to, and they're calling for outside help to come and do that. I think maybe sometimes it can be a sign of like maybe this person needs to be snatched, is if there's a conversation, or at least like an open call for like help in a situation that maybe they've lost control of and they don't know how to. And even if they might be fighting you once the ball starts rolling, like maybe in a conversation of clear-headed thought, they're like, hey, even if I'm really fighting against you, like please, like just don't let what I say keep you from, like kind of that Greek myth of like the boat passing past that like the sirens, and they're like whatever. Like maybe it's kind of one of those things where it's like, once we get into this, like I'm probably gonna start. I don't know if that can be a sign of knowing this is a time to snatch, even if they fight back. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I'm just wondering if there's like signs on who to.
Well, and I think like, yeah, I think that's probably good or like a good signature. There's some people I know that like I do kind of just think like I'm gonna wait on having that conversation because they're actually content with where they are. So I think like I can't convince you that the fire's hot.
Woo.
But once you realize the fire's hot, now I can say, and here's how you put it out. But if someone is living a certain way and they're like content with it and they're just like, yeah, I'm cool. Those are the ones that I tend to be patient with.
Yeah. One of those things of like praying them into the hand of the devil. Like, hey, I'm gonna pray that God allows you to taste what you're sowing. And then when you realize that it's horrible, then you want to get out.
Then it'll be time.
Like that's like one of the greatest things God ever allowed for me and has allowed for me, is allowing me to like just reap the fruit of what I was sowing. Like, bro, that was crazy.
Right before I feel like I started to actually understand what the truth of the gospel was and what it felt like, or what it meant to follow Jesus. I was so anxious. I could barely think straight. I couldn't go to work. I couldn't get my homework done. Like there were a bunch of things. And it's not because I wasn't smart or I wasn't a hard worker or whatever. Like God allowed all of the thought processes and things that I had in my head to just like come to this rock bottom point that I finally heard it. And I'm telling you, dude, like when the scales fell off of Paul's eyes, like that's what it was like. It was like people had been telling me my whole life that Jesus died to pay for my sins, and I would have said, yeah, it's great. I had no idea what I was talking about because I was like completely like swamped in trying to earn God's love, and I literally wasn't hearing any of it. It was like I finally was so just like worn out from it that when I heard it, it finally hit. And then I'm telling you, dude, I started reading the Bible, and it was like I had read it for the first time. And I had read these passages like probably hundreds of times. And I started reading it and went, I didn't even know that was in there. Or that's what that meant. Wow, I had no idea. Like God, like you were saying, like God had to allow me to get to a point of like, he had to let me reap some of what I was sowing. Like, I'm going to let you feel what it's really like to try to earn it. It's not as a punishment, but just as a thing of like, so that when you hear it, you can actually see what I'm trying to tell you. Yeah.
And I think that speaks volumes of like the power of like the lens that we're reading life through, or that we're looking at things through. That like the Bible is not a foreign book to you. Like, you were probably reading it regularly, but you say you're going back through and you're reading it, it's like you were reading it for the first time. Like when people are coming at me or coming at us in general with like, oh, you're doing this and it's like whatever. Like, if they're looking at those things through the lens of their own understanding, apart from the Spirit, like they're not going to be able to see what God's doing. Mm-hmm. And it's like we cannot convince people otherwise. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have got to just allow God to like you said, let those break those scales off of their eyes so that they can see what's going on. You know what I'm saying? I remember the first times I set a boundary, it was a pretty intense boundary that I set. It was like one of the first ones, and I was like, dang, God, you're starting me off with a tough one. But I remember just being like, man, he would do his work up, man. I mean, like, he was like not even being dramatic. He was like, he really was trying to fight me. Like, he even told me, he was like, I'm not gonna lie, bro, I want to punch you so bad right now. I was like, okay, I don't know what to do with that. All right. Anyways, I just told him, I was like, I know you don't see this as this right now, because he was like, man, like, I thought you said you love me, like, how you gonna like da. And I was like, I know you don't see this right now, but like, this is the most loving thing I could do for you right now. And you can't see it because you're seeing it through this lens of something else. And actually, funny enough, like, I think like 6 months later, he like came and told me, he was like, yo, bro, like, I appreciate you like doing that, yada, yada, yada. Which he never had to say that. We've got to take the stuff that we've been through and the way that we're seeing things, and we've got to like actively take that before God and be like, yo, I need you to like allow me to see what you see here. Because like, we're missing out on so much when we try to like put stuff through the processor of like our own understanding of life. Because like, our own understanding is not uncomfortable to us. Like, that's like my first sign that I'm like not looking at things correctly, is when it like doesn't seem uncomfortable. I'm like, no. I don't feel like this is from God, because this isn't that uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying? Something ain't right. Because like, it brings me peace, but it's super uncomfortable.
This like visual just popped in my head.
The Spirit.
Of like, there's a couple different verses that talk about God like lighting our path. I think about like, if I'm walking down a path with a flashlight and I'm like lighting where my feet are, the only thing I know is the next step, or maybe two.
That's good.
That's the only thing I could see. I'll be self-righteous if I think that just being able to see the next couple of steps means I just know everything I need to do. So I think, like we were saying earlier, am I going to be confident in what this next step is? Yes. But if someone brings something to me of like, doesn't seem like it's the right thing anymore, I've got to be willing, even though it was the Spirit who told me the first time. Yep. It doesn't negate that.
Nope.
But I've got to be willing to take it back and go, okay, is this still?
Yep.
Is it still? Is it still what I do? Do I change it? Like, so that's why I keep telling people, I was doing basketball training for a long time. I feel like I was supposed to lay it down.
Yep.
So I stopped. People have said like, oh, so like you're done? I'm like, nope. Because that was just the step that he said to take for right now. If he could tell me to pick it back up tomorrow. Yep. And I've got to be able to know that just because he lit my step for maybe a couple months, that doesn't mean it's like the final say. It's like, I've got to be okay with the fact that even though I really enjoy doing this, if at some point God says, yeah, I need you to pivot and do something else, that I can actually hear him when he says to lay it down. I think that, again, like you were saying, having security in what he said allows us to realize that the things that he says can change too.
Yep. And we won't be scared about like, oh no, like, my whole world is falling down because whatever. Like,
was I on the wrong path? He told me to stop. I must have gone the wrong way. Like, yeah.
There's such a difference between, our own understanding lighting the path and God, because it's like, we know our end now, which is eternal life with God. You know what I'm saying? That's our end path. So if we're allowing this one who our eternal end is within, if we're allowing him to light the path, like, we won't have to worry about what step he calls us to take, because we know eventually where it ends to. So there's a security in like the final outcome.
We know the end of the path.
Whereas with my understanding, I don't know where it's taking me. So I'm trying to make this guess, like, maybe this one's gonna like take me the right way, or like whatever. And then so it's like I'm tweaking out, even if it seems like the best decision possible. But like with God, it can seem like the worst decision possible, but like we can have peace because we know He knows. We know the final destination, but like God can take whatever route He wants to get until He gets there. It doesn't have to be the straight shot of like boom, 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 boom. You know what I'm saying? I think having that security again will allow us to be able to question it too. We can go, oh God, was I wrong about that? Because it's like, it's not up to me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I even heard someone say recently, like, he just like switched his vocabulary a little bit. Instead of like, the Spirit told me or the Spirit said, he'll say like, I sense the Spirit saying, or I sense, because he was like, I don't always get it right.
Facts.
He said, I don't always sense it right, but like, if I say that I sense it, I'm allowing space for human error while also telling you, like, this is what I sensed.
Yeah, that's deep. I like that.
And so then, it has, like, a different humility to it. Because I've heard people say stuff that they say it's so bold, and I'm just like, I don't feel like the Spirit would have told you to say that. But you're saying it so boldly that now people are taking it as that's what the Spirit said, and you're driving them away from Jesus. Because you're saying, like, the Holy Spirit gave me a vision last night to vote for whoever, and they said, like, and so they think that's what Jesus is talking about when he says, don't blaspheme the Holy Spirit. It's like, don't be out there saying confidently that I said something if I didn't say it.
Don't put my name on that.
So then I think, like, yeah, like, you got to be able to have some space for human error there in a way to be able to say maybe what you feel like God's put on your heart, but not put something in the Spirit's mouth.
And I'm actually so glad you said that, because that was something that God brought up like over the summer, where I realized that I was interpreting, like I realized that me as my responsibility in seeking out who God is so that whenever the Spirit puts something on my heart, I'm able to interpret it correctly because I know the character of God. Instead of translating it through my own understanding or like belief system, or you know what I'm saying? Because there's been times where God will be like, hey, I want you to go talk to that person. I make up in my head what that talk is supposed to look like. And then he's going like, yeah, you talked to him, but like, that's not what I was like wanting that to go.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, dang. Well, I thought you said talk to me. He's like, yeah, but like, you didn't know my character enough and you weren't able to discern like what I meant by that. When I said go talk to that person, your immediate thought was, oh, I'm going to go do it, which was great. But you didn't go like, what do you want me to say? Like, there wasn't that follow-up question of like, okay, bet I'm ready. What's going to come out of my mouth? You know what I'm saying?
Well, and even, I'll tell this story because I think it's a good example of it. I was talking to a pastor, and he's been doing ministry for, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 years at least. Him and his wife. And they were in like this other country, and they were just like walking through this place, and he was like, I felt the Spirit say like, hey, there's someone in this room that I need you guys to go and talk to. So he's like, okay. So he's like, okay, stop for a second. Like, I think we're supposed to go in here. But then he walks in, and the Spirit's like, yeah, I need your wife to talk to her.
Ooh.
So he's like, oh, okay. So then he goes to her, and he's like, hey, I think you're supposed to say something. So that she goes in and talks to this lady. This lady's like been doing like witchcraft and like all these different things, like is in tune with all these like evil spirits.
For sure.
And it had a vision the night before of, she was like, this person came into the room, they were like dressed in white, and they said like, this lady is gonna come to your room tomorrow and she's gonna tell you about me. And like this literally like detailed description from Jesus.
Wow.
But that a lady was gonna come and tell her. And so then the lady was able to say like, yeah, so that person you had the vision of is Jesus. Here's who he is, here's what he did, and they like led this lady to Jesus.
Wow.
Now that first step was from the Spirit.
Yep.
Stop and talk.
Yep.
But if he had shut it off right there and gone, yep, that's the whole message, he could have totally walked in and botched the whole thing. But like every step he was going, and now what? And now what? So that he could see, oh, that actually wasn't for me. You were just getting us to stop, and you were telling me to let this other person know. Yeah. Like you were saying, just because Jesus said to walk up and say something, don't turn the spirit off now. That wasn't the end of wasn't the end of what I was trying to tell you.
He turned it from you, and that's such a man. That's making me think just about some marriage stuff, and just thinking about like, you know, you, Luke, as like the man in the relationship has such a huge responsibility in terms of like dying to yourself, and Anna has responsibility in there as well. I'm just saying, as the man, you have responsibility of like dying to yourself in that, and like having the humility as what can often be a very like toxic trait for us men. I think of like, oh, I'm gonna be like the covering, and like I'm gonna take control of the situation, and like you as a leader there, as what Christ says a leader is, which is like the servant. You know what I'm saying? Like of having the humility to like, God could have just put that on his wife's spirit and been like, hey, I want you to go in and talk to this woman. He totally could have done that. But the fact that he used like their matrimony and allowed the husband to be a part of that, like, I don't know, I'm not sure how it was that God wanted to use that altogether, but just thinking like, dang, like you could have bypassed him and went straight to the wife, but like he had a responsibility in being the one to convey that to his wife. And I think we see like in the garden how like that responsibility wasn't stewarded well, and he didn't convey the message of we don't eat from this tree because of da 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 da. And then Eve received the wrong message, and then like there was like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's like God allowed that dude to have the responsibility of conveying his message and his will clearly to his wife, so that she was able to walk in the fullness of God's will. Like that's just like such a huge responsibility, and I know that happens back and forth. I'm not saying that the wife doesn't do that too, but I just think, man, that's a huge responsibility there, because I could be so quick to like, oh, and I'm like out of there. It's like, whoa, where are you going, dude? This is not for you.
He even said, like, he said, I've been a preacher preaching on stages for all like the majority of his life. He was like, you know how much better words-wise I could have probably presented the gospel to that lady, just because I'm more used to doing it, and I'm a better public speaker, and I'm more comfortable in those scenarios. So like, he totally could have blocked the spirit in that point and walked in there, and like, even if he kind of felt a nudge of like she's supposed to do it, he could have been like, if she really needs to hear it, I'm gonna do it because I'm better at conveying this. And he could have blocked it. I've also heard, again, like kind of like you were saying, it happening the other way. There was a couple that the wife said she felt in her spirit like they were supposed to go and do ministry in Atlanta, and they were in Chicago. She's like, yeah, I think we're supposed to go to Atlanta. Like, I'm feeling the spirit to say we're supposed to go. And her husband's like, I do not want to go there. Like, we are not going to Atlanta. Like, I don't feel it. And instead of like forcing it and pushing, like, this is what he said, this is what he said, this is what he said, she says she literally didn't bring it up again and just prayed about it. It was like, wow. It was like, hey, if your spirit put this on my heart, I know this is what's supposed to happen. And she was confident in it. She knew it's what he said. And like a few months later, the husband comes to her and goes, yep, we're supposed to go. But like, again, that only happens when you have security in the spirit. And the fact that he said it to you right now doesn't mean it has to happen right now. Like, that she was like able to be secure and like, yep, he told me. I'm gonna wait on him to tell my husband too.
I think that's been some of the security I've been having too, of like, I don't have to like prove this is going back to the recent conversation I had where someone was trying to like come against my decision making. Like, I don't have to prove to you that this is like what needs to be done. I know I am confident enough in what I'm doing right now. Again, like you said, I'm open to like, man, I know I need to do this. I know that I need to do even better. But like, I don't have to convince you that this is right. This is what needs to be done. And I'm praying that God is going to allow you to see that too. Not so that you come back to me and now Ezra's the big winner of the argument, but so that you would be able to see who God is, what Jesus has done for you, and that you would grab hold to the same truth that I'm holding on to that has led me to making this certain decision.
That's really good. Let's pray. God, just thank you for being sovereign and just being in control. God, I know that we have a hard time relinquishing that control sometimes, and that God, we want to follow you, and we want it to make sense to everyone that's around us. But God, that we know that that's not what you promised. And that God, that makes it difficult, and sometimes we choose not to do it. But God, I pray that we would just have security in what you're telling us to do. God, that it wouldn't become a blind security to where we're not listening to instruction from wise people around us, or that we're not listening when your Spirit tells us it's time to change directions. But God, just a security and just the next step that you've given us to take that step. And that God, we would take that step regardless of the backlash, regardless of the hate or just people being confused. God, I pray that you would just give us the security to take the step anyway. That God, that we would not be just people pleasers doing what they want us to do, but that God, we would do it out of a love, doing what we believe is best for the people that are around us, so that they can experience relationship with you, so that they can, just be able to have have access to the salvation that you bring, and not just so that we can win arguments and prove that we're right. God, we love you. Thank you for Jesus. Thank you for your sacrifice. In Jesus' name, amen.